Welcome to the Tea of Life podcast, where our mission is to transform every attitude of life by encouraging and equipping you to live the life you love and love the life you live. I am your host, Tiffany Thompson. Welcome back to Tea of Life podcast. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode journey of homeschooling through high school. I was excited to log into my website today and find that I have quite a few new email subscribers. If you are listening and you are one of those new subscribers, welcome. And if you are not a new subscriber and you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about right now, on my website, you have an option to subscribe. And that is not the same as subscribing to Spotify or iTunes podcast. But every time I post something on my website, you will immediately be notified. Whether it's a new podcast episode or a life article or anything else that I decide to post on my website, you will be the first to be notified. So, if you would like to also be one of my subscribers, go to teaoflifepodcast.com, click on contact at the very top of the page, and then you'll see on the right side of the contact page, it says never miss an episode or life article. And that's where you will put in your name and email, and that will allow you to be the first to know when something is posted. And also, I really want you to know that I will never, ever share your name or email with anyone ever. Okay? So go there now, subscribe, and then you'll get all the new stuff coming out as soon as it releases. So, last episode, I shared with you a bit of our homeschooling journey, but if you'd like to hear more about that, you can actually go back and listen to episode number 4, and that is the beginning of our homeschool journey chat, I guess. And if you want to get that episode quickly, you can visit my website again at teaoflifepodcast.com. Click on this episode, and you will find a link to episode 4 there in the show notes. And if you have any questions or comments about anything that I share on my podcast, you can send them to Tiffany at teaoflifepodcast.com. I will try my best to answer them for you. I want to answer everything that I can for any of my listeners. And you never know when the answer to your question could be life-changing for someone else. There are no stupid questions, and yeah, there may be some stupid answers, but I'll try my best not to give a stupid answer. So now I'd like to give my number 1 how-to when it comes to homeschooling through high school and pretty much anything else in life, especially when you feel overwhelmed and you want to start anything new. And that is number 1, relax, take a break, breathe. And I know that's easy for me to say, especially if you're just starting out and maybe your kid is already in high school. Maybe you guys are overwhelmed. You don't feel like you have time to take a break or relax or breathe, and you just need to keep going and going and going. You're afraid that if you miss a moment in education, your child will fall drastically behind. And if you aren't able to catch back up, then your kid will fail and you will fail, and you don't want to take a break because you're afraid. I get it. Well, I want to encourage you that that is absolutely not true. I can promise you that that is not true at all. If anything, you will gain traction and refocus. You will be able to refresh yourself. I've heard it said sometimes, that in order to move forward, you must first take a step backwards to get better traction. So take that step backwards, take a breather, take a break, gain better traction. I promise that the universe will continue and the world will not stop spinning if you just take a stinking break. All right? There is your permission. I promise that your kid will get into college if that's the goal. And I promise that you will not screw up your kid just for taking a break. I promise that you will not be a bad parent if you just take a break. In fact, some of you will instantly become better parents if you just take a break. Some of you have never taken a break. Some of you have never taken a break from school and the chaos that it can add to your family life or anything else regarding your life. You've never slowed down, breathe, just breathe. Some of you don't even know that you can take a break, but guess what? I've said it like how many times now already in this podcast that you can take a break? Take a break. And others of you are just looking for permission to take a break. How many times have I said take a break in this episode already? And I'm only a few minutes in. So here's your permission. Do it. Take a freaking break. All right. Depending on where you live, taking that break may be easier or it may be harder. And during this break that we are kind of in, we're coming out of a break, right? A worldwide break. But I encourage you to relax. Maybe get outside, get into nature, get quiet, listen, meditate some. If you've never meditated, maybe now is the time to learn how to do that. I was kind of brought up that meditation was bad. And I was taught that it was kind of new agey and that somehow demons were going to be summoned whenever I meditated. But that cannot be further from the truth. And I'm going to have to leave that discussion for a different episode, but meditating is good, okay? But now that I'm older and somewhat wiser, I believe that meditation is a must for anyone and everyone. One of the best books that I've read is called 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And yes, I will put a link to that in my show notes. And it was great. It was actually recommended by a guy named John Mays, who we actually interviewed. Not really sure what number that was, but I'm sure I could probably look it up and put that in the show notes as well. But I can't say that it was completely life-changing for me reading this book, but it was probably pretty close. And if you want a link to that, just go to my website again, toflifepodcast.com, click on the show notes for this episode, and you will be able to find a link to that book. It's really good. So, on to number 2. Find someone who is already doing what you want to do and take them to lunch or to coffee or wherever and ask them a lot of questions. Find and talk to someone who is already homeschooling in high school. Even if their homeschooling looks different than what you desire yours to look like, you can't figure out what you need to do until you figure out what you don't want to do. It'll allow you to narrow it all down. Also, you need community. You need to find others who have gone there before you and can lead or pull you along. You need to have others there who can help you when you lose vision of your why. And seek out other homeschooling families in your area. There are plenty of Facebook groups that are local to communities and those centered on your particular state and area. And there are also national Facebook groups. And one Facebook group that I am currently in is called It's Not That Hard to Homeschool High School. That's a long name for a Facebook group, but that is the name of the group. And yes, I will post a link to that as well in my show notes. But really, y'all, it's right there in the name. This is a national Facebook group that allows questions and gives encouragement to anyone who is homeschooling in high school. I'm also involved in local groups to Georgia and co-ops in my community who give support when we, or I personally, need it. So number 3, talk about or make a list of what your goals are for homeschooling. I've talked a lot in this podcast about finding your why. This is one area where you will definitely want to know your why. If you don't know your why and state your why, it will be harder to accomplish your goals. And in the not so distant future, when you feel like everything is going crazy, and you will feel this way, and chances are you will be going crazy, and you've lost track and have no idea what's going on, you can look back at your why and bring it all back home and then take a break. So over the years, the reason that we homeschool have somewhat changed, but our why has stayed the same. Reasons and why are similar, but are not the same. A reason is a cause, and a why stems from the reason. So a cause creates a reason, which then forms a why. Yeah, you might have to rewind that and listen to that again and again, right? Clear as mud, right? So, for example, due to some reasons, we decided early that our why for homeschooling is to build strong character by allowing them to enjoy life, find their own way, and not get lost in the social norm, and to create their own path. We wanted them to find a life of their own, allowing them to figure out who they are and what they want out of life without feeling the pressures of others telling them who they are and trying to make them someone that they aren't and weren't created to be. You might have to listen to that one again too, right? We didn't want our kids to get caught up in what I refer as the conveyor belt society. So my husband and I have always been a bit of a rebel when it comes to doing things just because that's how we're told that it should be done or because that's how everyone else is doing it. We've never quite fit into the normal ways of living life. And if you knew our goals and dreams, you'd probably agree. We do things a little differently and we take risks that others may not take or may be afraid of taking. And we like to think of ourselves as pioneers instead of rebels, though, because we tend to do things way before they are considered the social norm or considered cool. And usually when others are like, hey, look at this new idea, we're like, yeah, we've been doing that for years. And yeah, we're already doing that. Hello. However, at the time we started, people thought we were crazy, kind of like when we started our homeschooling journey. Yes, people thought we were crazy. So back to character building. Our reason for choosing that is because we were drawn to the character that we saw in other homeschooling kids and families. And we were concerned about the lack of character we saw in others. And no, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm obviously not talking about your kid. Wink, wink. But make no mistake about it, homeschooling doesn't only create character in our kids, it also creates character in us. Your reason or cause can be vastly different than ours or even vastly different from your best friend's reason for homeschooling. That's okay and totally great. Your why needs to be uniquely your own or it'll never stick and you will grow tired of it very quickly and lose traction, focus, and motivation. So on to number 4. You're going to want to find out what your state laws are requiring homeschooling, how strict they are, how lenient they are, what they are, and this will also be important when implementing step number 5. You're going to want to make sure that you are following your state's guidelines for homeschooling while also taking into account that you are not trying to make your homeschool look like a public school or traditional private school. You want to make it your own. You want to make it different. I mean, that's what you're doing, right? That's why you're doing this, right? Because you want things to be different. Basically, I look at this as how far can I go with this and still be in the confines of our state's homeschooling laws? Well, finding out your state's laws and how you should abide by them will also help in making your homeschool unique and all about your particular family. I look at the law for what it literally says and don't add or take away from its wording. It can be tricky, but reading it at its actual wording and not assuming that it's saying something that it is not saying could make a big difference in your level of success or your level of stress or your even level of failure in your homeschooling experience. Yes, I just said failure. So you might want to make sure that you know what your homeschooling laws are in your particular state. If you have, if you need help kind of deciphering through those laws, you can find a friend, you can get on the websites, you can find Facebook groups. There's another group called hslda.com. It's the homeschooling, it's like a group of homeschooling lawyers who protect homeschoolers. You can check that out. I can put a link for that in the show notes as well. So Number 5, you want to take some time to figure out how your child learns best. This will go a long way when it comes to finding out a curriculum for your child. Are they more apt to learn by listening, seeing, feeling, moving, being around other people, or being alone, or by communicating verbally? This will also play a big part in choosing your curriculum and how you teach your curriculum. Actually, everything I'm talking about here will play a big part in choosing your curriculum. Also, don't think that the curriculum that you choose today will be the final above all end all curriculum that you use from here on out, because it won't. Needs change, and sometimes the changes come frequently and abruptly. And in episode 4, when I talked about how I started homeschooling, I mentioned that we used a particular box curriculum when we started. Then we moved on to more of an eclectic style. And then after a few years of that, we had started using a K-12 curriculum provided by our state at that time. And we absolutely loved it. Well, it was very, very soon after that episode released that things changed, and they changed big time. And we no longer love that curriculum. And in fact, their way of doing school at home no longer lined up with my family's values for homeschooling or our why. And we immediately pulled out of that program. And it was back to traditional eclectic style homeschool for us, and right in the middle of high school too. However, we did it. We figured out what our kids needed, and my husband and I supplied it for them, and nobody suffered. My son was still able to dual enroll in our local college, graduate high school, and still get accepted into college with my homemade transcripts. Now his little brother is on his way to doing the exact same thing. So be prepared to be extremely flexible when choosing your curriculum. Again, I will talk about that more later as well, so make sure you check back for other episodes. Okay, so number 6, think about what you want your homeschooling experience, space, and day to look like. Remember, you are more than likely homeschooling because you want something different than what the public school system or even the private school system has to offer. So don't try to mimic them. One of the biggest mistakes that new homeschooling families makes is trying to bring the previous school schedule and routine home. You are not trying to mimic the school system that has, I'm sure, failed you. That is why you are homeschooling right now, right? So you want to make it different, make it fun, make it unique, make it your own. But most of all, make it work for you and your kiddos. In episode 4, I think I even talked about how in the start of our homeschool, we started, I made my kids get up, get dressed, get their backpack, go to the schoolroom. We did the Pledge of Allegiance, and we quickly burned out on that. I was like, this is not what I want my homeschool to look like. I don't want to replicate public school. So we took a break and we stopped doing what was not working. And we did what was working, which was not that. Now we mainly homeschool in a particular space. But before we settled into this particular space, our kids would homeschool in their room, in the kitchen, in the living room, outside, sometimes even on our hammock or trampoline or at the park. And I have friends who do a lot of traveling and they homeschool in an RV, and some who are just involved in a lot of different activities around town. So they do some of their homeschooling in a minivan. We watch a family on YouTube who travels the world on a catamaran, which is our dream. And they homeschool on a catamaran out in the middle of the Pacific, and it works for them. And they actually had a kid graduate from catamaran school to college. So it all works. Okay. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Isn't that what they say? I don't know. Anyway, so my friends who, do their homeschooling in their minivan actually have specific curriculum and particular items that they purchase just for their van ride. And this works for them as well. So let's recap and quickly go over the 6 things again. Number 1, can you tell me what it was? I said it like a million times. Relax. Take a break. Breathe. Number 2, find someone who is already doing what you want to do and ask them a lot of questions. Number 3, figure out your homeschooling goals. Number 4, research your state laws. Number 5, learn your child's learning styles. Number 6, think about how you want your homeschool experience to look. So how do you feel now? Does this make you feel better, worse, or even more overwhelmed, or do you feel a bit of relief? I really hope that you feel some relief because that was my goal. Maybe you have even more questions now that you've listened to this episode. I plan on expanding more in later episodes and some of the points in this chat. So if you have any questions that you would like answered regarding these points or anything else regarding homeschooling, please feel free to leave me a comment under this episode on my website or send me an email to tiffany@teaoflifepodcast.com. And I really hope that this makes you feel at least a little bit better and put a couple of things into perspective. If you're a list maker like me and or a visual learner also like me, hopefully this will help you put a few things in order and see what you need to accomplish before or while making that leap into traditional homeschooling. If you are a visual learner like me, sometimes just starting the homeschooling day and getting into it can help. You can go places where you can actually look at curriculum that, like, you can actually put your hands on it and your eyes on it. You can touch it and feel it and smell it and sniff it if you want to. We can talk more about that later as well. And so congratulations. Just by listening to this episode, you are now a bit closer to starting your new homeschooling adventure. My goal is to encourage you and to make things feel a little easier for you. So stay tuned for more episodes and more information to come. Thank you for listening to Tea of Life podcast. If you have 2 friends who need to transform every attitude of life, tell them about us. Also, right now, before you forget, go to Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to a podcast and hit that subscribe or follow button. That way you will never miss an episode. Thanks for listening to Tea of Life podcast, and we'll see you next time.